Hello, everybody. My name is Paul Quinney, and this is the Flames Faceoff, brought to you by the Hockey Writers. This is a weekly show where we bring together some of our best writers from the Calgary Flames writing pool, and we discuss all things Flames. To make sure you don't miss an edition of this, you can subscribe to this YouTube channel. Just press that little red button on the right-hand corner of the screen. You can follow us on Twitter and Facebook and like this video on YouTube and Facebook and share it with your friends. And be sure to check out some of the great hockey content that we've got here at thehockeywriters.com. So with that, let's get going. I'd like to introduce our panel. We have with us Greg Tysowski. Greg, welcome. How are you?
I'm good. I was telling you before the show started, I had a tea time at 4:00 this afternoon, and I'm looking outside, and it's currently a snowstorm. So I don't know what's going to happen. I'm sorry.
Snow in Calgary. You guys are all over the map. You know, I was watching it this winter. Sometimes it looked like you're in the tropics, relatively speaking, and now you're back into winter and it's spring.
Yeah.
Go figure. And we have Brett Krauss. Brett, welcome. How are things?
Oh, not too bad. A little bit worse from Greg's news as I haven't looked out the window yet today, but you know what? The Blue Jays are back this weekend, so I've been enjoying baseball all weekend.
Yeah, well, hey, look at it this way. You'll just extend the ski season out there. That's all. Time for a trip up to Lake Louise.
Exactly.
But well, let's get right into it. The first thing I wanted to deal with was what's up with Jacob Markstrom. I mean, if I look at his numbers, he's perfectly below average at something like 0.896 save percentage. He's 901 on the season. And in fact, it looks like Dave Riddick is actually better. Not by much, but by the numbers, he is. So what's your take, Greg? What's up with Markstrom?
You know, I wish I knew, but I've been kind of snooping around the internets for the last couple of weeks, and there seems to be a lot of rumors out there saying that, you know, that he's been injured and playing injured for the last 2/3 of the season. He had that really hot start for the first month where he kind of carried the team and was the obvious MVP of the Flames. And then he had that kind of crazy collision where he came to challenge a player out of the blue line, and he stayed in the game. And then a couple of games after that, he was on the injured reserve for six games. And, you know, he hasn't been the same, I think, since that first month ended. And there's a lot of speculation that he's been playing through an injury, which wouldn't be the first time that an NHL player, you know, is playing through an injury. But I think that if that is the case, then he should be kind of the 1B right now. And Riddick should be carrying the load. And I've kind of gone on record already saying that this season is like 99%, you know, gone for any playoff aspirations. So like, there's really no point in riding Markstrom so hard at this point in the season. So like, I agree with you, Paul, that Riddick has been playing better, and he should probably get most of the starts down the stretch. And I actually have a crazy idea here as well, and that is maybe if Markstrom is in fact playing injured, there's no harm in shutting him down the rest of the season if that's the case. You know, like if there's no playoffs coming and there's no hope, just get this guy healthy and get him ready for next season. Because I do believe he's a big upgrade on many of the goalies we've had in the past. So I think you're right. I think it's time for Riddick to carry the load.
Yeah. What do you think, Breck? What's your take? Is it injuries or something more to it?
I think I agree with Greg there. I think it's a lot, probably with that injury, you know, that collision he had, and then he was out for however many games. And, you know, he was lights out in Vancouver last year and started this season great. And, you know, I think a lot of Flames fans probably thought, okay, great, we have some stability in net. And then he just hasn't been the same. So I think it definitely could be injury. I think he just doesn't look, you know, like he did in the early parts of the season. And I mean, I'm no goalie expert, but he just doesn't look to be making some of the saves that he needs to be. So I think there's probably something going on that we don't know about.
Mm-hmm. So are you in Greg's square where you'd play Riddick, ride him to the end of the season?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I mean, if you're doing more harm to Markstrom, why not shut him down for the remaining games? Unless they still believe they have a shot. I mean, mathematically they do, but everything has to go their way. So, I mean, I would have no problem with them just going with Riddick for the rest of the season here.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, Greg. Some observers are saying that one of the reasons you'd want to play Riddick until the end of the season is showcase him for a trade. What's your take? Is Riddick going to be here after trade deadline?
Yeah, I've actually heard a lot about that in the recent weeks, because he's Riddick is could be a definite asset for a team looking for some kind of insurance down the stretch and into the playoffs, because he has at times played like a number one goalie over the last few seasons. And he's kind of had his troubles where he kind of lost the starting job to Mike Smith, and he lost the starting job to Cam Talbot before the last two playoffs. So he's obviously inconsistent, but he's played well enough in stretches that I think a lot of the teams around the league recognize that he's a legitimate NHL goalie who could help a team down the stretch. So I would not be surprised if he went at the trade deadline, and I'm kind of hoping that he does, just so we can kind of stock up our cupboards with some more draft picks and whatnot. And I actually have another kind of crazy idea as well. Like, remember I said, like, shut down Markstrom. I say you shut down Markstrom and you trade Riddick, and then you have the dynamic duo of third string Deming and Big Snag Zag leading the charge the rest of the way. And these are obviously not, top tier NHL goalies, but I think it helps your cause and maybe getting you that higher draft pick. Because if the Flames decide in the next few games that the tipping point has come between must-win games and then meaningless games, like once they've turned that corner, there's no reason to kind of shoot for the stars here, like try and get some wins. Like I say, you kind of unload as many people as you can, and you save the big guns until the summertime, like Boudreau and other where you can kind of make it more of a hockey deal. But for now, you unload some of your players that you can, and just hope for that higher draft pick. That's my pick, or that's my take.
Where are you on this, Brett? Is he going to be here after the trade deadline, or?
I mean, if I'm Brad Treliving, I'm definitely trying to, trade Riddick, just to get draft picks this year. I think they need to, they need a few extra this year. I think they have 7 picks, but I think they should pick up an extra few for this summer's draft. But it's hard to say, because I think it was either Elliot Friedman or Chris Johnson was saying on last night that it's pretty quiet right now in terms of trade activity. So who knows? We'll see. But I think they should definitely try and make some moves here to sell off those expiring contracts.
Yeah. Greg, have you heard where he might end up? I mean, I've heard rumors that the Leafs are shopping around for some extra goaltending depth, and so are the Colorado Avalanche. Any speculation on your part that if they were to trade him, where he might end up?
No, actually, I haven't really heard any, trade partners that are kind of a definite match. But those two that you just mentioned make sense to me. Especially the Leafs kind of have an unusual situation where Anderson has been hurt, and even their current number one goalie can't seem to stay healthy. He plays Campbell plays one game, and then he can't play the next, and they have Hutchison in that. So I think that Riddick is a definite upgrade over Hutchison, who is actually playing tonight against the Flames, if I'm not mistaken. And so I think that's a more of an obvious trade partner at this point, based on what I've read and what I've seen with Maple Leafs kind of weird goaltending situation, and they could use some stability, because they're probably the odds-on favorite to take the North Division. But goaltending is so important in the playoffs. You really can't go into the playoffs if your situation's shaky, and if Anderson can't go, and if Campbell's not 100%, like you need more depth in goal. So actually, I like that I like that plan. So we'll see if it comes to fruition.
Yeah. Brett, any thoughts on if we did trade him, where that would leave Calgary for goaltenders?
Yeah, I think Toronto definitely makes a ton of sense because I think I'm not sure what the quarantine period is for in country trades, if at all, but I think Toronto is probably top of the list. I mean, they've seen firsthand that week where, David Riddick stood on his head and, he nearly stole 2 games from them in 2 days. So I think they're probably the top of the list. And I think Colorado is a team that makes a lot of sense too. You mentioned, just because I've seen storylines that their backup goaltending has been troublesome for them this year. And I think a team like that could really, Riddick could help Colorado and Colorado could probably help Riddick, probably ease his workload more than the Flames have. So I think that could be a one to look out for.
Well, who knows? I mean, if he does end up in Toronto, imagine that. He'll go from the Calgary Flames to a Stanley Cup contender. I'm sure the good burgers of Toronto will be accelerating the planning for the Stanley Cup parade down Yonge Street if it is announced. We'll see. Speaking of what's up with people, what's up with Tkachuk? He seems like he's been missing in action now for weeks. He simply hasn't been a factor this season. I think he's got 10 goals on 38 games, 28 points in total, nowhere near what his production has been in the past. Greg, what's your take on Tkachuk? What's going on with him?
I was a bit surprised actually, because in my recent article that I wrote this week, I was looking at who the Flames 3 stars of the month were, and I kind of was going through the month of March and seeing who had the most points. And I was actually surprised to see that Matthew Tkachuk had the second most points behind Elias Lindholm. He had like 2 goals and 9 assists for 11 points in 15 games. So it was like, I was like, really? Because he seemed to be invisible, and so, but he was like second on the team in scoring for the month of March. So that was a bit surprising. So he's obviously still producing a little bit. He's actually second on the team now in scoring after his goal against the Oilers. And he's just behind Elias Lindholm by a couple of points. So it's not as if he's done nothing this year, but he's been missing from those big moments. Like I remember there were some pretty big goals last year that Tkachuk was a part of, and either setting up or finishing. It's just he's just not been present, and it doesn't bode well for a team that's supposed to be his team. Is supposed to be the cornerstone, supposed to be the future captain, and all of these things are kind of placed on his shoulders, and now seems like I can't really explain why, and we all remember the rumors that came out about the room telling him that maybe you should cool it on your antics after the big puck throwing incident against the Maple Leafs. So, I wish I could be a fly on the wall in that dressing room and just find out like what's the real story. Why is Matthew Tkachuk, not being the factor that everyone thought he would be? Like what's happening? I'd love to know why, because it's puzzling, it's perplexing, it's confusing actually. I have no idea.
Yeah, I've heard that theory that he's, pouting. I don't know what the word is I'm looking for after that Muzzin incident. Brett, do you put any stock in that? And if you do, at what point do you have to say to him, look, man, you're the future captain of this team. You're the cornerstone of the franchise. If that's all it takes to put you off that way, there's a problem. What's your take?
Yeah, kind of from like the sort of both sides of the coin. I think it's for a guy like Tkachuk who plays that way, it was probably, if those rumors are true or somewhat true, it's probably disheartening to kind of hear that from your team, because you probably feels like they don't really have your back, and they're what are they playing for? But at the same time too, those guys probably don't want to be in a scrum after every single whistle or stoppage when Tkachuk's on the ice. So I kind of get that too. But I think think there's a lot of factors. I definitely, have noticed that he hasn't been as present this season, but the other night against the Oilers, I thought that was probably one of his best games in a while. He really looked engaged, and after he kind of took a dumb penalty, he came right out of the box, took the puck and scored, which, that's the way to do it. So I think, if his first year playing away from Michael Backlund for most of the season, I think that has a big effect, because I don't think a lot of people know how much, Michael Backlund can really improve a player's playing ability. Like he had Lance Buma score 20 goals, in 2014 or 15. So I think probably, just a bigger workload for him playing with Lindholm and Dubé, who started great, but they, have kind of haven't found their groove since. So I think there's several factors, but it's also really his kind of first down season since he hopped into the NHL as an 18-year-old. So it's kind of hard to put too much pressure on him, but I think, he definitely holds himself accountable in press conferences that I've watched. So I think it could just be a down year, which it has been for the entire team. So it's just, I think it's a lot of factors.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, he did. I do notice him in the press conferences. I forget which game it was, but the mic caught him. He was asked a question. You could hear him say, "Oh God." And, last night or Friday night, he kind of, beat himself up. He's nailed himself to the wall, and he is holding himself accountable. That I would agree with. So what do you think, gentlemen? Do you think the Flames will be active at the trade deadline? So to make the postseason now, I think, Greg, you pointed to the stats. My numbers were that they'd have to win 16 of the last 19 games. I personally don't think that that's going to happen. And they may not be sellers at the trade deadline, but they're certainly not going to be buyers. But well, actually, let's do a quick poll. Yes or no answer. Greg, are they going to see the postseason?
Well, I'm on record as saying no for the last
No?
week and a half. So I have to say no, because I got to be consistent. And I was saying that Montreal basically has to play a little over 500 hockey the rest of the way, just kind of cruise. So there's no real.
Yeah.
They don't have to do anything to make it. It's the Flames that have to go lights out, like 800 hockey right at this point, 815, whatever the number is. So I have to say, based on the numbers and based on the way they've been playing, I'm going to say no. No way, no how. Not even close.
Brett, yes or no? And if it's yes or no that they're not going to make the playoffs, then let's start off with Ryan. Is he on the trade block?
Yeah, I think last weekend I said no as well, and so I'll stick with it. I think it's just it's a Hail Mary at this point. They have to win basically every game, and they need other teams to start losing, which I just don't really see happening. Montreal's been looking pretty good since coming off their postponement. So I think they're finished for the season, and I absolutely think that Derek Ryan, if they make any move, I think it'll be Derek Ryan, because I think he's a serviceable, fourth line guy who could step in at center or just play on the wing on a team's fourth line. I know they've already been talking about the Oilers are looking for a right shot depth forward, so remains to be seen if they'll trade him there. But I think I'm not sure how much they'll sell. I don't think it'll be a lot. It might be a Derek Ryan, and that could be it. But I think they've got to at least sell off one of their expiring contracts and get some extra draft picks this summer.
Okay. So Greg, it's Brett saying, as you heard, Ryan, a lot of people would have thought or said Bennett. What's your take on the Bennett situation versus Ryan?
Well, I think the Flames just have to try and find a trade partner who will kind of buy into the mindset that Bennett is what you're getting is playoff Bennett and not regular season Bennett. And if other teams are kind of looking at what they want in a kind of a rental, and if they believe that Sam Bennett can be that guy who has been arguably the best player for the Flames in some of his postseasons, then they have to kind of showcase that. And Bennett's actually played okay, I find, down the stretch these last few weeks. And I think under Sutter, he's gotten a lot of different responsibilities. He's kind of played more in power play. He's kind of been shuffled around. He's kind of been showcased a bit. So, but is anyone out there kind of buying what the Flames are selling, that Bennett can be this difference maker in the playoffs? Because he hasn't really been so much of a difference maker in the regular season. That's obvious. And this year's no difference, because he has 4 goals, I believe, and his last one was kind of one that any NHL goalie should have stopped. But but I think the Flames would still love to unload him, because they'll probably expose him at the Seattle expansion draft, which they'll get nothing for him. So at least at this point, I think they'd be willing to take some kind of draft picks for Bennett at this point. So I'm hoping that they unload Bennett, and I'm hoping that they unload a lot of people like Riddick, Ryan, even like someone like Josh Levo. People are talking that he might have some interest because hasn't been lighting it up this year at all, but he's still, I think, seen as a serviceable forward that could maybe add a little bit of depth in for some other teams. So yeah, I would love to see Bennett go, because get something for him rather than lose him for nothing at the expansion draft. So
yeah. Well, Brett, say something about Greg's talking about the 6 or 7 unrestricted free agents, the so-called low budget UFAs that Calgary has on the roster. Do you unload them? One view is that, why bother? All you're going to get is some low draft picks anyway. But then the counter argument to that is that there's been a lot of stars in the NHL that came in as low draft picks. So, and you've got to have the picks to play the game. What's your take? Are we going to see some of these guys gone next week?
Yeah, I think you might see. It's unpredictable to say right now, but I think you need to get draft picks. You look at Andrew Mangiapane from the 6th round, Johnny Gaudreau's a 4th round guy, Dubé and Anderson and Shillington are 2nd round guys. So there's obviously legitimate talent outside the 1st round, and so I think you might as well sell them, because if they walk as UFAs and don't come back, well, then you didn't get anything in return. So you might as well get a free lottery ticket out of it. So I think, yeah, they got to try and do something a little. And then, I think you can make room for guys like a Matthew Phillips to come take a few spins in the NHL this season, and see if he's a legitimate NHL player. Same with like an Adam Ruzicka, and even bring back Glenn Godden. So they have guys that could fill those spots, I think, if they were to sell, but remains to be seen what they will do.
Yeah. I don't know. I was reading one sports writer. She was saying we could trade Nesterov for Bobby Orr, and I thought, maybe not bad. I don't know where Nesterov would end up, but what about trading major assets at the deadline? Any prospect of that happening, Greg? What's your take?
Well, not from what I've heard. It kind of sounds like the consensus is that the Flames should wait until the summer to kind of deal with these big contracts and these big players that everyone's been talking about all season long, like Johnny Gaudreau. Like they say, there's a much better chance of making a deal in the summer than it is to try and get something at the trade deadline. Do you guys remember what we got for Jerome McGinley back in a few years ago? It was, I know that his, he was on an expiring contract, but he was still he was still a 30 goal scorer. He scored 30 goals the next year for Boston, I believe, and he scored 30 goals in Colorado. And I was just amazed at how little we got for Jerome McGinley at the end of his time in Calgary. And I feel if the Flames tried to do something similar with Goudreau right now, we would be shocked at how little we'd be getting back the other way. So I think they have to wait till the summertime to do anything big like that. It just doesn't work. And he's also, I think Goudreau only has a select list of teams that he would like to go to. And so that kind of restricts you as well. So no, I'm fully in the camp to suggest that the Flames have to wait until the summer to do any of these big transactions. This is not the time, and certainly not the season. And with COVID and everything else, it's all kinds of things hampering the process. So it's like, I say just wait, see what happens in the summer, and that's the plan. That's my theory, anyways.
Yeah, well, I guess you'd have 31. Your potential market in the summer is 31 teams as opposed to a handful now.
Yeah.
And I agree with you on your comments about Goudreau. I'm not sure you will get anything near what fans expect to get from him.
Yeah.
The other guy in that category, not sure what your thoughts are on this, Brett, but would be Monahan. I was astonished looking at the stats recently. He's in his last 10 games, he's gone goalless. That follows on a 12-game goalless streak back in January, February. Something like 7 goals in 36 games. What are your thoughts on him and big trades of major assets before the deadline?
Well, I'll never say never, but I will say I highly doubt seeing them move anybody like that at the deadline, because I think it's something like 18 or 20 teams are either over the cap by a long-term injured reserve or within $500,000 of the cap. So we did see Winnipeg and Columbus there make a big move, but it was it fit like a glove. It made sense. And so I don't think we'll see them make a move at the deadline. I think something will come, I think, at the draft, or post expansion draft, maybe the week after the expansion draft, and that's all sorted. But I think I've kind of been thinking that Trey Living's kind of started his tenure here, making some big moves. He went out and got Dougie Hamilton for just draft picks, and then he flipped him for Elias Lindholm and Noah Hannafin. So I think he's got to make one of those types of moves again. He hasn't really since the Lindholm trade. And I think, it's a guy like Monahan, it might almost be selling low at this point after, he's been so consistent goal scoring wise anyway. And now this year he's completely disappeared. Like, you can't even tell he's on the ice most nights. So, it's hard to even say, like, do you want to trade him in the summer? Because are you even getting a return you'd hope for back? So, but I will say that I think I'm on team trade Monahan, because then they'll actually finally split up Goudreau and Monahan for a game, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's amazing they haven't split them up. So what are your thoughts then, gentlemen, on a rebuild, to rebuild or not to rebuild? We touched on it last week a bit, but Greg, are we looking at something major in terms of a rebuild, a major selling off of assets this summer, or not?
It's funny. I was listening to some local sports radio in my car the other day, and they had their Flames roundtable, and they were pretty much all in agreement, except for the Flames play-by-play radio voice, Derek Wills, who's kind of a homer, but everybody else was all in agreement that the Flames should rebuild, but they probably won't rebuild. Like, this is a team that probably needs to be torn down, and because they've just been kind of in a broken record every year, just same old situation where they can sometimes make the playoffs and lose in the first round, and then they have another season where it's kind of mediocre, or follow that with another playoff season, losing the first round. So it's been kind of frustrating to watch. So, and to think that they can somehow win with this core group with a few tweaks, to me, is just kind of insanity, because it just hasn't worked. But the fact that they got Daryl Sutter for the next 2 years, he wasn't hired to start a rebuild. He was hired to kind of take what they had and kind of improve on it and make them into a contender. And I don't think they would have, signed Markstrom and Tanev, they wanted to be complementary pieces to this core and try and get this team in the right direction. And so I kind of agree with that roundtable I heard on the radio saying is that they should rebuild, but they probably won't. And I don't think it'll be a big tear down and start from scratch. And I think they're going to just try and keep tinkering. They're just going to try and there might be one big player moved out, but they're not going to be, selling everybody off and getting rid of everybody and tearing it down. Even though as much as I'd like to see it actually, but I think it's not in the cards for this organization, and they've never really done that, like to go down from scratch like this. So, that's I don't think it's going to happen, even though I think it's much needed.
Yeah, Brett, rebuild or more tweaking?
Yeah, I think they need to decide quick, because they either got to pull the trigger on trading one of their big pieces, or just have a complete yard sale and take 2, 3, 4 guys and start around them again. Because I think I'm not even really sure that the end of the Jerome McGinley era was really a rebuild. They had kind of some late round picks that turned out in Goudreau, and they got Monahan, and Bennett was a bust for a 4th overall pick, and who knows if the lottery balls bounce a different way and the Flames end up with like a Leon Draisaitl that year. What are we talking about playoffs right now? So I think they have to decide this summer what they're going to do. If it's a sort of a retool, I think they have to make a big trade to shake things up. But I think that Flames roundtable is right, that they should rebuild, because the next 2 drafts have a ton of exciting talents that are probably going to be NHL superstars. And if they kind of just pass by and sitting in 16th place on the outside of the playoffs overall, and get that middle 1st round draft pick, it's going to be the same thing over and over. They're just not going to get anywhere and keep just spinning their tires.
Yeah. Well, next week is going to be a very interesting week. Make for an interesting discussion next week when we get together. But for this week, unfortunately, gentlemen, we've run out of time. As always, it's been a great discussion. And thanks, everybody, for joining us again this week. We'll be back next week with another edition of the Flames Faceoff. In the meantime, to make sure that you don't miss an edition, you can subscribe to this YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter and Facebook, like this video on YouTube and Facebook, and share it with your friends. And be sure to check out the hockeywriters.com, where you'll find the Flames Weekly, which comes out every Monday, and it'll recap everything that happened in the previous week and take a look forward at the upcoming week. And don't forget to check out some of the great hockey content that we've got here at thehockeywriters.com. Until next week.